welcome to Ekate's Crossing. Okay, so I want to do a little bit more exploration into the runes. So I want to sort of explore a little bit with this Nordic magic healing. Okay, so I want to do runes and healing. Healing guide, healing runes. Okay, so this is the first part. So we're looking at runes and healing. And all along their way she taught him the runes upon her white hand. Danmarks gamla Volkswagen, enchant populaires in Scandinaves. Right, runes are magical tools. Tools for all aspects of life. They can be used and were used in many ways for war, for love, for prosperity, and so on. In this book, we're going to explore the runes and the Gald, the song, associated with them. To begin this exploration, I'll first give you a glimpse of how the runes were actively used in the past by using examples from an area that interests me very much, healing. The following 3 rune poems show us the magical use of the runes to affect someone else's health. Those who carve without knowledge should not write the runes, for great misfortune will follow when the secrets are misused. I have seen 10 letters carved on the whalebone. They brought on the pain that tortured the leek's lime tree. Sail 1. In this poem, leek's lime tree designates a slender woman. The leek brings in the idea of being slender and beautiful, and the lime tree is a classical image for a woman in Skaldic poetry. Thinking of the leek you buy at the marketplace, you might get a wrong feeling. This image obviously refers to the wild leek, a beautiful, slender, deep green stem rising above the other herbs. This poem is one of Egil Skallagrimson's, as told in the saga that describes his life. The runes that this poem referred to were carved into a whalebone in an attempt to seduce the young girl, the slender woman, who is spoken of in the poem, but instead they only serve to make her ill. Besides the technical error of having chosen the wrong runes, this is an attempt at this kind of magic to force someone to act against their will. Whenever runes are carved for someone, this person must be made aware of what is being carved for them. They must agree with the carver, and they should participate in the creation of the poem that asks for their healing. Using the runes is more dangerous than you might believe. Get deeply involved when you do. Magic is not nice and funny. The next poem gives us the only example of how a healing should be done. The poem was found written in runes at Sigtuna on a copper plaque that dates from the end of the 11th century. Demon of the fever of wounds, lord of the demons, now you must flee. You have been discovered 3 kinds of pain on you, wolf. 3 times the misery, wolf. The rune of ice. These ice runes will be your only joy, wolf. Enjoy the seal well. Rune 1. This important poem will be discussed later in detail, with particular attention given to the seal, a kind of shamanic journey, practiced by Norse magicians. Clearly, the only ill wished here is for the sickness. Unfortunately, there are many examples of what not to do, using the runes for harming others. This book will not explain, and has no desire to explain, how to practice this kind of magic. Nevertheless, it would be dishonest to try to hide this kind of use and its traces. Busler's curse, found in the saga of Bosi and Herod, where it is called a prayer, is a very striking example of a harmful use, although there is no evidence that these verses were carved in runes. I wish you pain in your breast, that venomous vipers gnaw your heart, that your ears are deafened forever, and your eyes become wall-eyed forever. Ida. Runes for divination or magic. Since many people used runes for divination, we will now discuss their role in the ancient society. First, the title of this book needs to be justified, since the runes aren't commonly used for healing. Mystical books on runes have clearly shown that today their use is essential for divination. essentially for definition. This means that the runes are arranged in a specific system, and the seeker is asked to choose several of them. By interpreting the runes chosen, the rune reader helps people to better understand their difficulties, to better guide their life. Used this way, rune readings are similar to tea leaf readings or tarot card readings. However, modern books on runes don't show how they can be used for healing. The widely accepted belief in the divinatory abilities of the runes comes mostly from the widely cited Latin text written by Tacitus. For omens and the casting of lots, they have the highest regard. Their procedure in casting lots is always the same. They cut off a branch of a nut-bearing tree and slice it into strips. These they mark with different signs and throw them completely at random onto a white cloth. Then the priest of the state, if the consultation is a public one, or the father of the family, if it is a private, offers a prayer to the gods and looking up at the sky picks up 3 strips, one at a time, and reads their meaning from the signs previously scored on them. If the lots forbid an enterprise, there is no deliberation that day on the matter in question. If they permit it, confirmation by the making of auspices is required. From this text we might be able to conclude that the Germanic people were adept at magic, but we can't say it shows us how the runes were used. A Roman, such as Tacitus, would interpret definition as he knew it in the Greek-Latin culture. Therefore, we can't be certain that he understood exactly what was going on in the Germanic culture. Tacitus also says that Tacitus, I don't know his name, also says that in case of success, a confirmation was required. Why would this be needed if the runes already did a foretelling? Besides, a bit later, Tacitus describes what he considers as the most important foretelling technique, the interpretation of the neighs and snorts of sacred white horses. Another reason for the confusion about the use of runes could be attributed to the Celtic Oghams. The Druids were known to use all sorts of divinatory methods, from observing birds in flight to watching the convulsions of a victim stabbed in the back. In particular, the story of Etain, well known in Celtic mythology, attests to the use of the Oghams as a method of seeing. In this case, the Druid Darlin uses the Oghams to discover that Etain had been married to a god. The writings about the Pethanin, or the Elucidator, also known as the Druid's Wheel, describes a type of divination which used branches or staves that had poems or maxims carved on them in Oghams. Transferring an interpretation from the Ogham to the runes is certainly possible, but there is no historical justification for doing so. One thing is consistent in the runic texts. They all show an active use of the runes. In other words, they are used to act on the future or to wish for a change in the physical world. For instance, one of the few texts that allude to the throwing of sacred branches in Guthric's saga, and clearly the runes in this case aren't used to foresee the future, but to control it. The king Vika came up against extraordinarily adverse winds, and they stayed near small islands for a long time. They threw some sort of fate sticks in order to diminish the winds. The result was that Odin demanded that a man from the company be chosen by a drawer and be hung as a sacrifice. After these magical pieces of wood were thrown, the storm calmed itself, and Odin demanded that one of the passengers on that boat be sacrificed. The sacrifice took place several days later. This does not describe an example of divination, because clearly the priest already knew what he wanted to achieve, and without a doubt simply wanted to pay the due price, a sacrifice to the High One in this case. The runes of the elder Futhak, like those of the younger Futhak, serve as meditation between humans and gods, a means of asking the gods to grant a favour. In Gillis Sursan saga, we find an example that looks casual enough, but it works in a similar way. The hero of the saga, Gilsli, wants to meet up with his brother, who refuses to open his door to him. Gisli takes a stick, carves runes on it, and throws it inside. His brother sees it, catches it, looks at it, then he gets up, goes out, and welcomes Gisli. Saga 3. This is not exactly what we'd call miraculous, and certainly no great sacrifice was called for, but regardless of the price of this tiny miracle, does show that the effect of the runes is not to foresee, but to obtain a result since Gisli did not try to speak to his brother first through the door, but without any success. We also find references to runes carved on a pole of infamy. These are also attempting to alter reality. An example of this comes to us through Vance Diola saga. The goal in this case is to curse those who break a solemn promise. This one will be infamous to all and never fine. Company with honest people, he will incur the wrath of the gods, and he will carry the name of peace violator. Saga 4. The following runic text comes from Eagle Skallagrimson's saga. I place here a pole of infamy against King Eric and Queen Gunhild, and I direct this curse to the guardian spirits of this country, so that each of them will be lost, unable to find their way, until they have successfully driven King Eric and Queen Gunhild out of this land. Saga 5. This demand is far more significant than the previous one, but similar in the sense that it relates to shaping the future and not to predicting it. In Gretti's saga Asmundasona, there is a sorceress who wants to ruin Gretti. In order to do so, we are told that she took her knife and carved runes on a stump. She then reddened them with her blood and muttered a magical spell. Then she turned counterclockwise around the stump and recited powerful magical spells. Since the sorceress wanted them to make sure to be able to harm Gretti before she begins the final spell, she spies on him and listens to him speak so that she can discover his weak point. When she finally does carve the runes that will bring about Gretti's ruin, she has it all planned and knows that she only needs to follow the proper steps to succeed. Sorry. Runes are also alluded to in other sagas, but in each case they either request that an event happened, or they assert and consecrate something, as for example in stating, this ship is captained by X. This active use of runes is also found in relatively recent texts and customs, such as Denmark's Gamla Volkeviser, assembled by S. Grundtvig between 1853 and 1883. This collection of popular Danish poems contain 18 that mention runes. They show how to use them to calm floods, immobilize animals, seduce a partner, bring on deep sleep, ease birth, etc. But never once is there an allusion to a divinatory use of the runes. In the same way, Deichmann in 1794, cited by Léon Pinot, Chants Populaires Scandinaves, 1898, page 144, explains two practices that were common in his time. The first, also described by Saxo Grammaticus some 5 centuries earlier, is that it's a belief today, still common in the region of Himmelsjärg, that if the runes are engraved on a small piece of wood and it is placed under the tongue of a corpse, the dead will talk. The second is when Icelanders want to harm someone, they take a piece of wood the length of 2 or 3 fingers, they engrave on it magical characters, and they make their blood run upon them. After this they go to the a tomb of a corpse. Following this is a cursing ritual that I've no desire to repeat. In any case, there is no allusion, not even a subtle one, to a divinatory use of runes. My purpose by this long argument is not to say that using the runes for divination is absurd, but to show that this is a more recent use that was certainly not practiced since time immemorial, as many mystical books on runes state without batting an eye. Non-runic divinatory methods. There were obviously a large number of divinatory techniques in the Nordic society. It seems that the one used most often is called seder, a kind of shamanic journey. When knowledge of the future is what is desired, the magical means that was used by seder and not the runes. Many texts meaning the work of a volva or a seeress who performs a seder to perform the future, to determine the future. For example, in the Vatnsdæla saga, the host prepares a feast according to their ancient custom for conducting a seder. This was being done so that the people would know their destiny. A lap volva was asked to attend the feast so they could perform the seder. The lap, dressed in great gear, occupied the high seat at the feast. People went forward to ask their future and ask questions about their destiny. For each of them she prophesied their future. A similar example of this use of the seer, and this is the only example I know of a seer conducted by a Scandinavian male, is found in Gisli Sarsen saga. Thorgrim the Norse was paid to perform a seer that would locate a murderer, thus preventing him from getting away healthy and safe, even if others tried to help him. In return, Thorgrim was given an ox that was 9 winters old. He began the seer preparing for it as usual and building a scaffold. He completed the seer with all his spells and evil doings, effectively locating the murderer. Saga 6. The word used for spells in the original text is ergi. In chapter 3 we'll discuss this concept at length, where we will show that it actually means impotence or passive homosexuality. This text is thus very despising towards the use of seer, but it does show that Thorgrim the Norse was able to use seer successfully to accomplish his task. To complete this brief discussion of seer, I want to also consider the examples of seer which attempt to modify the future, and we have many instances of those in the sagas. In particular, there are many examples where Lap shamans have performed the seer as they were requested correctly, anticipating the future. We learn from the text that when they have been asked to perform a seer in order to retrieve an object, but they failed. Despite their efforts, they were incapable of physically modifying reality. The role of seer is twofold: to anticipate the future and, where possible, to modify the world of physical reality. The role of the runes, as the sagas and Eddic texts illustrate, is to affect physical reality, to concentrate a possession, or to claim some power, but never to foresee the future. More discussions and references on the use of seers are given in the excellent paper of H.R. Ellis Davidson, Hostile Magic in the Icelandic Sagas, published in The Witch in History, referred in the bibliography, but also see the appendix for more detail. Healing and using runes to heal. The focus of this book is to study the runes as they relate to health and well-being. The runes were grouped into 9 rune songs according to the lay of Sigdrifa. See later in this chapter. And of those 9 songs, 4 are dedicated to health. The runes are branches. Those are the physicians of primary importance here. Delivery runes are used to help in childbirth, and they also relate directly to the medical area. Runes of protection help in preventing sickness. The runes of joy are also included with the healing runes because they are powerful in the prevention of sickness. The 5 remaining rune songs are victory, undertow, magic, speech, and spirit. I deeply believe that each rune can be used to influence health, with the exception of Othala, and this will be explained later. Contemplating the rune typically assigned for this purpose, the end of this chapter will present a summary of the effect of each rune on health, and volume 2 of this book will be devoted to an in-depth study of the 24 runes of the Elder Futhak and their relation to health. It is interesting to note that no text describes the specific healing use of the runes. I've used the runic texts to find out the various meanings of each rune, and then from these meanings I've associated a particular healing power to each of them. What is striking about the ancient Northern European myths, those referring to runes such as the Icelandic and Irish sagas, Celtic and Germanic legends, the Old English poem Beowulf, etc., is the extreme lack of details concerning health, and yet healing must certainly have taken place. A rare example of a healing treatment is found in the Icelandic saga of Glum the Murderer. It tells the story of a woman whose close relative has just been killed. She asks to see the corpse, and they show it to her. She then takes her relative and lays him gently in a cart, and when she gets back home, and she cleans and bandages wounds. She did all this so well that when she was done, he started to speak. Saga 7. This is an extraordinary miracle that well deserves to be told. However, when someone is simply hurt, the sagas often only explain what the end result of the injury was, and they do not discuss the care that has been provided. One of the few references that I could find to doctor or healer of any kind, as in the saga of the men of Vapniford. Theophard was a man who was thought of very highly in his community, and he was considered to be the best physician in the district. One evening a man broke his leg on the farm, and Thorfard was sent for. So Thorfard came and bandaged the leg. The man then said to Thorfard, "My wounds are to the point where, thanks to your assistance, we can take care of it by ourselves. But I know that Thorkel is hurt, that he has nobody to care for him, and that he is weakening. I asked you to join him and to heal him." Thorfard agreed to this and went to Thorkel's place. He approached Thorkel and said, "I would like to see your wound, because I've heard that it goes badly." Thorkel allowed him to see it, and Thorfard spent 7 nights with him, and the state of the patient improved each day. Thorfard went away, and for his care Thorkel gave him a horse and a silver bracelet. Saga 8. This payment must have been extraordinary, since the saga mentions it, but there are no details at all about how the wound was treated specifically. Another medical treatment, though an unsuccessful one, is found in Gretti's saga. When Gretti is wounded, and his wound obviously starts to gangrene, his brother Illugi treats him. The saga says simply, "Illugi watched him day and night, taking care of nothing else." Saga 9. The saga of King Hrolf and the champion describes a similar type of recovery. King Hrolf had received 2 wounds to his arms and a major injury to his head, which caused him to lose an eye. These injuries weakened him for some time, but Queen Raza healed him. Saga 10. In the tale of Egil and Asmund, we are given some details about surgery. Egil lost a hand in a fight, and a friendly dwarf dressed the stump so well that soon the pain was completely gone. In the morning the wound was healed. The dwarf then made a sword with a hilt in the form of a socket, and he fixed it onto Egil's arm. Later in the tale, Egil meets an old giantess who had kept the hand that was cut off, wrapped in life herbs. She offers to help Egil. "If you'll risk letting me reopen the wound, I'll try to graft the hand onto the arm." The tale goes on. She took the socket off his arm and deadened the arm so that Egil didn't feel any pain. When she trimmed the stump, then she put life herbs on it, wrapped it in silk, and held it firmly for the rest of the day. Egil could feel the life flow in. The old hag put him to bed and told him to stay there until his hand was healed. It was fully healed in 3 days, and now he found the hand no stiffer than it had been when the arm was still whole, though it appeared to have a red thread around it. Saga 11. This description can certainly be called a mere fantasy. Still, when taken all together, the details on the painkillers and the disinfectants, the healing herbs, the bandage, and the quiet time necessary for a recovery look like the tip of an impressive iceberg of medical knowledge. In the history of St. Olaf, Snorri Sturluson describes a medical treatment as it was performed on a wounded man named Tormod. The healing fails, but it shows that some knowledge of surgery was common in the Nordic world. Tormod then went away to a little room which he entered. Many were already there, sorely wounded men, and there was present a woman who bound up their wounds. A fire was burning on the floor, and she warmed water wherewith to wash their wounds. Tormod sat down by the door. One came out and the other went in, of those who were busying themselves with the wounded men. One of them turned to Tormod, looked at him, and said, "Why art thou so pale? Art thou wounded, and why dost thou not ask for a leech?" Then Tormod quoth a verse: "I have no fresh hue, but the fair slim woman herself hath a ruddy husband. Few bother about my wounds, generous woman. The wound in me was caused by the deep track of Dag's spell, and the Danish weapon smart." Dag is the name of the warrior who wounded Tormod. Tormod then stood up and went to the fire, where he stood for a while. The leech said to him, "Thou man, go out and fetch me the wood which lies outside the door." He went out, brought in an armful of wood, and cast it down on the floor. The leech man looked at his face and said, "Strangely pale is this man. Why art thou so?" Then quoth Tormod, "The noble woman wonders that we are so wan. Few grow fair of wounds. I found them in the arrow fall. Though me the curb steel went mightily driven, keenly hath the perilous iron pierced near my heart, I think." Then said the leech, "Let me see thy wounds, and I will attend to them." He sat he sat down and took off his clothes. When the leech saw his wounds, she looked carefully at the wound in his side. She noticed that therein stood a bit of iron, but knew not for sure what path the iron had taken. In a stone kettle she had put leeks and other grass, and cooked them together. She gave it to the wounded men to eat, and so tried to find out if they had deep wounds, for she could notice the smell of the leek coming out of the deep wound. She brought it to Tormod and bade him eat. He answered, "Take it away, I have not throat sickness." She took a pair of tongues to draw out the iron, but it was fast and would not come out. It stood but a little way out, for the wound was swollen. Then saw Tormod, "Cut the flesh away down to the iron, so that thou canst get at it well with the tongs. Then give them to me, and let me wrench it." She did as he said. The Tormod took the gold ring off his hand and gave it to the leech, bidding her to do with it what she would. "A good possession it is," he said. "King Olaf gave me this ring this morning." Tormod afterwards took the tongs and wrenched the arrow out. There were barbs on it, and on these lay the fibres of the heart, some red, some white, and when he saw it, he said, "Well hath the king fed us. Fat am I still about the roots of the heart." He then fell back and was dead. Here ends the tale of Tormod, Saga 12. Okay, I could go on and on and on about some texts going on about the medical stuff going on, but we're not going to read any more of that. So I'm just going to do this last little bit here, the runes and their songs. This section is devoted to the explanation of what kind of power the runes wield. Before putting forward this power, it might be useful to put forward the possible hazards of this power. The church has stressed a lot these dangers. For instance, Pierre de Langres, a famous French inquisitor of the early 1600s, had this to say about the magical ways of healing. "As for those not understood characters conceived in the hieroglyphs engraved in unknown letters, all the superstition draw us towards diabolical curiosities." De Langres' writing suggests that it was the attraction to the so-called diabolic that motivated the churches to ban the runes. That de Langres was a torturer does not prevent him from having informative opinions. As a matter of fact, in the Middle Ages, the runes were no longer being used with the respect they deserve. They had become simply a way to write secret or pseudo-secret incantations or messages. The Odin's lead tablet, for example, carries Latin words written in runes. Christus unicit, Christus regnat, Christus imperat, which means Christ conquers, Christ reigns, and Christ commands. Among these words, the formula Agla in runes is found, which is known for being the first letters of the Hebrew words Ata Gibor Leolam Adonai, meaning "Thou art strong to all eternity, Lord." This formula no longer is an invocation to the power of the rune Hegla or Hagala, as was the case in earlier inscriptions. At the other extreme, one finds runic inscriptions like the Bergen inscription on a stick of wood, probably from the beginning of the 13th century, which is some kind of obscene graffiti and can be translated as, and I'm not going to put that online. I am not going to read that. Okay, so we're not going to do that. The problem I see here does not come from using the runes for gaining some power over the world, since this is what the runes are made for. Nevertheless, as soon as power is gained, it can be misdirected and it can be dangerous. The formula of the Odin's tablet misdirects a power originating from the ancient heathen gods, not from Christ. The Bergen inscription simply jokes at the power, which is possibly not only if you are absolutely convinced that this power does not exist. In fact, misdirecting power can take more subtle forms. For instance, I found it remarkable that so many hand healers, and I have met many of them since, I'm also a shiatsu practitioner, though their motivation is apparently very pure, are driven by an urge towards power, because obviously they think that by doing the healing, they are not humbly waiting for the patient to heal. However, as we will see further on, one of the main principles of shamanic healing is that spirits heal, not the shamans, a point often largely underestimated by the shamans themselves. Again, the problem does not lie in the wish for power, but in mishandling power. This is why we should not reject the Church's or Delancre's opinion without thinking. Using the runes in a view of gaining power is perfectly possible, but this is a choice which cannot be made lightly. Search your soul each time you use the runes. Do not try to gain power, even a little, over nature or humans, without knowing the price to pay for this power. Interesting thought. Okay, so I'm not going to go on to there. Okay, so now we're talking about the interpretation. Okay, some of the interpretations I provide below are not usual. Next volume is devoted to explaining why I chose a particular interpretation against another one. Relying on the knowledge of the Northern Middle Ages of the runic inscriptions, on new interpretations of the various runic and Eddic poems, on yet unpublished runic verses, namely Predelir Runa, Nochvadilur, and Malruna Dil, as the manuscripts spell them, and on various etymological dictionaries of the English, Old Norse, and German languages. Okay, so let's begin with Fehu. Okay, so let's begin with Fehu. And then next video will continue. So we'll just do one for this one. We'll just do Fehu. Okay, so here we go. That's this one here. Just so you can see it. Okay. So, Fehu is the rune of cattle or livestock, of the primitive animal force, of wealth, with all the negative aspects of wealth, but also the internal wealth that is the best aid against distress. It is to be invoked each time a sense of poverty is felt. That is to say, a sense of being devoid of strength, without energy. Fehu enables the rebuilding of internal strength. I see in Fehu the rune of the mild feminine forces, because I associate Fehu to the primitive cow who in the Nordic mythic licked the first giant out of the original ice. Cognates German Fe. Cattle English Fe. Right, so here it says, translation cattle, earthly meaning is success, abundance, earned wealth, and good fortune. Spiritual meaning is fulfillment, growth, and expansion. Okay, so that's it from me. Don't forget to check the links down below, check the links on my channel, like, subscribe, and ring the bell so you know when the next video will be uploaded. Take care and bless it.